Hello and welcome to True North EV. I'm your host James, and here we're going to talk about all things electric vehicles here in Canada. Now, today we're going to be tackling something that's been bothering me for a while now. The massive amount of negative press and outright misinformation surrounding electric vehicles in Canada. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that you can connect with us and the EV community through the Manitoba Electric Vehicle Association at manitobaev.ca. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook at True North EV or shoot us an email at truenorthevpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. So, let's talk about what's been happening. If you've been on Facebook lately, you might have come across a page called the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Now, you'd think with a name like that, they'd be champion innovation, supporting Canadian manufacturing, and looking toward the future. But instead, what are they doing? They're posting constant fear-mongering content about how the EV mandate is going to destroy the Canadian auto industry. Let me be clear. That's not just misleading, it's flat out wrong. Here's what's actually been happening with Canada's EV mandate. The goal is to have 100% of new light-duty vehicle sales be zero emission by 2035. Notice I said new vehicle sales. That means, first, you can still buy used gas and diesel vehicles. Nobody is coming to take your existing car. Nobody is banning used vehicle sales. If you want to buy a used truck in 2036, 2040, or 2050, you'll still be able to do that. Second, plug-in hybrids count toward the mandate. And here's the kicker. If you buy a plug-in hybrid and choose never to plug it in, you can do that too. It'll just run like a regular hybrid. Is it the best use of the technology? No. But the point is the options are there. 3. The mandate creates opportunity, not destruction. This isn't about killing an industry. It's about positioning Canada to lead in a growing global market. Let's talk about what the EV mandate actually does for Canada. Manufacturing growth. Electric vehicles use batteries, motors, and electronics. Canada has the materials, lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, right here in our provinces. We can mine it, refine it, and manufacture it into components and vehicles right here at home. That means jobs. That means economic growth from coast to coast to coast. Energy independence. We're not shipping billions of dollars overseas for oil. We're using Canadian electricity, much of it hydro, wind, and solar, to power Canadian vehicles. That money stays in our economy. Building for the future. Every major automaker in the world is shifting to electric. If Canada doesn't adapt, we're not protecting our auto industry. We're abandoning it. The future is already being written in China and Europe. Do we want to be left behind? The mandate isn't destroying anything. It's giving our industry a roadmap to survive and thrive in the 21st century. Now, let's talk about this Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. They claim to represent Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty vehicles for more than 90 years. That sounds impressive, but when you look at what they're actually advocating for, you have to ask, who are they really representing? Because here's the thing, the major automakers are already investing billions into EVs. Ford has the F-150 Lightning, GM has the whole Ultium platform with vehicles like the Blazer EV and Silverado EV. Even the traditional manufacturers know where this is going, even though, depending on the crowd they are in, they will say otherwise. So, if the big manufacturers are already on board, who's pushing back? I think what we're seeing is that this group is really representing dealerships. and certain segments of the industry that are resistant to change. And I get it, change is scary. Dealerships make a lot of money on service, and EVs require less maintenance, no oil changes, or very few, fewer brake jobs, no transmission repairs. That's a disruption to their whole business model. But here's the hard truth. Resisting change doesn't stop change. It just means you get left behind. And then we have all the politics of it all. Right now, we have a major federal political party, the Conservatives, who are actively feeding into this fear and anger. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has dubbed the EV mandate the carny tax and has made it a central campaign issue, claiming that it would literally erase many small towns from the map, and that Prime Minister Carney has promised to ban your gas truck and car. Let's be absolutely clear. The EV mandate does not ban gas-powered vehicles. It requires that a certain percentage of new vehicles sold be zero emission, 20% in 2026, rising to 100% by 2035. But here's what that actually means. You can keep driving your current gas vehicle for as long as you want. You can buy a used gas vehicle anytime. Plug-in hybrids count towards the mandate, and you don't even have to plug them in if you don't want to. This is about what's available new on dealership lots, not what's in your driveway, and you could still buy used vehicles from the dealerships afterwards. Poilievre claims manufacturers will face a $1,000 penalty for each vehicle they sell over the cap, the so-called carny tax, that will be passed on to consumers. But this completely misrepresents how the system works. Manufacturers have multiple ways to comply. Selling EVs early for credits, banking credits from previous years, using a 3-year compliance window, or yes, buying credits from other manufacturers. The $20,000 figure isn't even a real market price. It's a regulatory ceiling tied to infrastructure investment that's rarely, if ever, reached. Here's the thing. The Conservative strategy worked with the carbon tax. They repeated "axe the tax" over 300 times in the House of Commons during one sitting. It's became divisive, and eventually Prime Minister Carney ended the consumer carbon price. Now they're trying the exact same playbook with EVs. But this kind of rhetoric doesn't help Canadians. It divides us. It creates anxiety where there doesn't need to be any. And worst of all, it's based on misinformation. The reality is simple. The transition to electric vehicles is happening over time. It's gradual, it's manageable, and it's full of options for everyone. Whether you want a fully electric vehicle, a plug-in hybrid, or to keep driving your current gas vehicle for as long as it runs. A Ledger poll from August 2025 found that 71% of Canadians feel it's unrealistic to phase out gas vehicles by 2035. Among Conservative voters, 85% view it as unrealistic, and only 11% think the target is necessary. You know what? That's fair feedback. That's why governments should be listening and potentially adjusting timelines. But there's a big difference between adjusting a policy and completely scrapping it based on fear-mongering. And here's the real concerning part. Prime Minister Carney has already shown he's willing to cave to this political pressure. He ended the consumer carbon price as one of his first acts after taking office, calling it too divisive. In September 2025, he suspended the 2026 EV mandate compliance target and launched a 60-day review to identify future ways to reduce costs. Green Party leader Elizabeth May has criticized what she sees as a liberal-conservative coalition, saying Carney is adopting all of Poilievre's policies before Pierre Poilievre can be engaged in the next federal election. So Poilievre's strategy of relentless attacking, repeating axe attacks over 300 times worked once, and now he's trying it again with EVs. The Conservative position is particularly ironic given that their own 2021 platform included support for EV manufacturing, hydrogen development, charging infrastructure, and coordination with U.S. standards. They weren't against EVs then, but now that it's politically convenient, they're leading the charge against the very transition they once supported. You know what strikes me about all of this resistance? We've been through major technological shifts before, and we adapted just fine. Think about landlines versus cell phones. 25 years ago, everyone had a landline. It was essential. The idea of giving it up seemed impossible. But look at us now. When's the last time you used a landline? Probably at work, if at all. Most of us don't even have one at home anymore. That transition happened fast. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. We didn't collapse as a society. We adapted, and life got better and more convenient. The shift to electric vehicles is the same thing. Yes, it's a change. Yes, it requires infrastructure investment. But we've proven time and time again that Canadians can adapt to new technology, especially when the technology makes life better. Now, I want to be fair here. Are there legitimate concerns about EV transition? Absolutely. But let's look at what the actual data tells us, not the fear-mongering. Cold weather performance. Yes, EVs lose some range in extreme cold. Studies show anywhere from 8% to 30% of most modern EVs and up to 50% in the most extreme conditions. Or with some of the older EVs that are just the resistive heating. But here's what they don't tell you. Gas cars lose up to 28% fuel efficiency in cold weather too, according to Natural Resources Canada. And unlike gas cars, EVs don't have problems starting in the cold. You can preheat them remotely while they're plugged in, especially coming from a nice warm vacation. And most modern EVs have battery heating systems. Canadians across the country, from the Yukon to Manitoba to Quebec, are driving EVs successfully in our winter right now. Charging infrastructure. That's a limiting area that we need continued investment. According to Natural Resources Canada, we're building out our charging network steadily. Here's the good news. Most Canadians drive less than 60 kilometers per day, and 80% of charging happens at home. For longer trips, our fast charging network is growing, and programs like the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program are supporting that growth. Electric Mobility Canada, which represents the entire EV industry ecosystem, has stated clearly that the EV mandate is achievable with current infrastructure plans. Affordability. Let's talk real numbers. Clean Energy Canada analyzed popular EV models and found that with just one exception, every electric vehicle they studied was cheaper to own than its gas equivalent. The electric Hyundai Kona is $17,800 cheaper to own over its lifetime than the gas version at $2 a liter for gas. Even at $1.45 a liter, it's still $10,500 cheaper. The Chevy Volt with a B, compared to a Toyota Corolla, $22,000 cheaper over the vehicle's lifetime. Yes, even EVs can cost more upfront, but total cost of ownership tells the real story. The grid can handle it. This is one of the biggest myths out there. A federal government study found that even if we hit our 2035 targets, EVs would only represent 3.4% of electrical demand in 2030. That grows to 16% by 2040 and 23% by 2050. But since this growth is spread over 30 years, utilities have plenty of time to plan and expand. In California, where EVs make up 21% of new car sales, EV charging currently accounts for less than 1% of the grid's peak load. Even Norway, where EVs account for about 90% of new car sales in 2024, hasn't experienced grid problems. Range anxiety. The average range of new EVs sold last year was 468 kilometers. Most Canadians drive less than 60 kilometers per day. Range is simply not the issue it's made out to be for the vast majority of people. These are real considerations that deserve honest answers. But when you look at the facts, not the fear, you see that these challenges are manageable, and in many cases already being addressed. Now, here's something that really gets me. There's all this fear-mongering about EV incentives and where the money is going to come from. People are wringing their hands about government spending on electric vehicle programs. But you know what nobody talks about? The absolutely massive subsidies we've been giving to oil and gas companies for decades. According to research from organizations like Environmental Defense and the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the federal government gives between $3 billion and $30 billion per year in subsidies to fossil fuel companies. That's right, billion with a B. The numbers vary depending on what you count, but even the most conservative estimates are in the billions. This includes direct cash grants, tax breaks, below-market financing, and get this, the federal government spent $34 billion buy and expand the Trans Mountain Pipeline. That's one pipeline, $34 billion of taxpayer money. These are companies making record profits, by the way. Canadian Natural Resource made over $7 billion in profit in 2024. Suncor reported $1.7 billion in profit in just the first 3 months of 2025. And we're still giving them billions in subsidies? Meanwhile, people complain about helping Canadians afford electric vehicles that will save them money on fuel and maintenance, reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and help us meet our climate commitments. It's a double standard, plain and simple. And speaking of double standards, let's talk about the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association and their members. Their website proudly lists Ford, GM, and Stellantis as members. These are the companies they claim to represent. But here's what those members have actually been doing in Canada recently. GM closed their Cami plant in Ingersoll, laying off 1,150 workers. They're cutting production in Oshawa, eliminating a third shift, and about 700 jobs. Meanwhile, they're ramping up production in Indiana and Michigan. Stellantis, they canceled production plans for the Jeep Compass at their Brampton plant, moving that production to Illinois instead. This is after receiving billions in government subsidies for their operations and battery plants in Canada. These companies took taxpayer money, our money, to invest in Canadian manufacturing. In 2022 alone, GM received over $500 million from federal and Ontario governments to retool plants and create jobs. And now, they're pulling back, moving production to the United States and laying off Canadian workers. The federal government was so disappointed with these moves that they cut GM's tariff-free import quota by 24% and slashed Stellantis' quota by 50%. That's how serious these broken commitments are. They're actually also now taking Stellantis to court to see what they can recoup. So when the CVMA talks about protecting the Canadian auto industry, you have to ask, which industry are they protecting? Because it's certainly not the Canadian workers who are losing their jobs, and it's not the Canadian taxpayers who funded these facilities. The irony is thick here. These same companies that are abandoning Canadian workers are being defended by an association claiming the EV mandate will hurt the industry. The EV mandate isn't what's hurting Canadian auto manufacturing. It's companies that take our subsidies and then move production across the border anyways. So what can we do as EV enthusiasts and advocates? First, share accurate information. When you see misinformation, counter it with facts. Share your own experiences with EVs. Let people know what it's really like. Second, call out the double standard. When people complain about EV subsidies, remind them about the billions going to oil and gas. Ask why profitable fossil fuel companies deserve taxpayer money, but helping Canadians afford cleaner vehicles doesn't. Third, support companies actually committed to Canada. Pay attention to which automakers are genuinely investing in Canadian manufacturing and workers, not just taking subsidies and leaving. Fourth, engage with your elected officials. Let them know you support smart EV policy. Let them know you see through the fear-mongering. Ask them to hold companies accountable when they break their commitments to Canadian workers. 5. Be patient and kind. Not everyone is ready to make the switch, and that's okay. Meet people where they are. Answer questions, share your enthusiasm without being pushy. The transition to electric vehicles isn't about forcing anyone to do anything. It's about building a better, cleaner, more prosperous future for all Canadians. And doing it with companies that are actually committed to being part of that future. Look, I know I'm passionate about this stuff, but it's because I genuinely believe that electric vehicles represent an incredible opportunity for Canada. We have the resources, the talent, and the ingenuity to be world leaders in this space. But we can't get there if we let fear and misinformation drive the conversation. So the next time you see a post from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association or a politician claiming the sky is falling, take a breath, check the facts, and remember, we've got this. Canadians have always been innovators. This is just the next chapter. And if you want to dive even deeper into EV topics with someone who really knows their stuff, go check out Bodhi's podcast, Kilowatt. Seriously, he's way better and way more knowledgeable than me. I learn something new every time I listen. Also, before you go, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It really helps other EV enthusiasts find our show. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, send us your suggestions. Thanks for listening to True North EV. I'm James, and I'll talk to you next time.